Hi folks, this is Dr. Rob Cywes, the CarbAddictionDoc, and I recently put out a video about supplements and really questioning the massive overuse of supplements and the rationale behind that. And I appreciate all the comments. There was a ton of criticism, there was a ton of flawed thinking, there was a ton of support, but I put that video out there to make you think and to understand why you're taking a supplement, just as an example of why we do certain things. And in response to some of that supplementation, I really want to take a step backwards and help you to understand critical thinking a little bit better, at least the way I do it and the way I look at so-called science. Well, first of all, the majority of reasons why we take stuff is because something goes viral. Cumin goes viral, or apple cider vinegar goes viral, or acai berry, I don't know what the hell you do with the stuff, was discovered in the Amazon jungle. These things go viral and it's promoted by turmeric is another one, that's promoted by people who discovered some little link that may be an association. They exploited it because they got something that can sell you, and they tell you about all these magical, mystical properties of how and why something works, and they sell it to you in nice packaging and you buy it like crazy. Look at where you get your information from. Look at where you get your information from. I'm not saying doctors are better than anybody else, but look at the source of your information. And when I look at claims that people make, I look at it very specifically from this context. Number one, I look at who's making the claim. And number two is I put that into the context of this statement. Nobody, not me, not anybody else, nobody is an expert. We're all students. We're all continuously learning. We're all continuously adapting. While LeBron James and Michael Jordan may be the two best basketball players that ever lived, both remain students of the game. And the day they think they are experts is the day they stop needing to do anything further to practice. Nobody practiced harder than Michael. Nobody practices harder, or very few practice harder than LeBron, because they are continuously students of what they do. And I'm a continuous student of what I do. So there's always room for improvement. Do we make mistakes? Of course we do. But number one, anybody who claims to be an expert or anybody who claims to have expert advice is full of shit. Because they're not. They're just students like you and me. That's the first thing. So I look at the source. The next critical, and for me this is the single most important thing, is their claim a cause or an association? Is the claim that this thing does harm or makes an improvement, is that an associative link, or is it a proven causal association? And I'll just give you a little bit of an example from a non-scientific thing. If you fly down from your house on Mars and you've never been to Earth and you see a house on fire, and you see a bunch of people running around that fire with hoses, did they cause the fire? Are they putting it out, or are they just standing around? If you look at a cigarette, if you've never seen a cigarette before, is the tobacco the problem, or is the filter the problem? You don't know. So when we look at something that we don't understand, we have to look at cause. We have to look at association. And it's so important in healthcare to understand the difference. That's the first thing. The second problem with healthcare as a science, and especially nutrition as a science, is you can get two radically different outcomes from prospectively conducted studies. So we have to understand bias. And bias is inherent to anybody that sets up a study. If you believe that fat is harmful, your study is immediately biased toward that metric. If you believe that a low-carb diet is the healthiest thing out there, your bias is always going to be that way. And the problem is even prospective scientific data in individual studies is going to be full of noise. It's not helpful to us. Single studies, no matter how well conducted, are of no value. So, okay, well then nothing has value. No, single studies don't have value. The two most powerful things that do have value is a body of work over time, where you can look at the same problem from multiple angles and develop massive bodies of work that over and over and over prove causation or association. So a body of work, and in healthcare, one of the commonest bodies of work that we use are meta-analyses. The problem is the meta-analysis is only as good as the studies that it puts in there and the biases of the people doing the analysis. So it's always best to have objective analysis. But while in science, the problem is that even when we look at peer-reviewed scientific studies, the way they were done may not have been, the methodology may not support the conclusion. So we've got to be able to read those studies and read those papers in an analytical way. When it comes to our own critical thinking, when we look at supplements, and in the next segment, I'm actually going to dissect vitamin D as an example of this, because almost everybody's got low vitamin D, almost everybody's on D. So just simply, while we get into it, is there any proof that taking vitamin D helps? Not only do you probably not know, you've probably never even looked at the studies that prove that we don't know. And yet you're religiously taking your vitamin D, and you doctors are religiously prescribing vitamin D because somebody somewhere found an cause. Low vitamin D levels cause these problems. And therefore the assumption is that if we give it, it's going to fix the problem. Low vitamin D, or vitamin D affects every cell with a nucleus in our body. Every nucleated cell in the body has vitamin D receptors. So therefore, any system that involves cells throughout the body can be associated with low vitamin D levels. But that didn't cause the problem. And we know that a standard American diet or a high carbohydrate, low fat diet is associated with steroid hormone harm. We know that through insulin resistance. And vitamin D is actually not a vitamin, it's a hormone. It is one of the steroid hormones. So it's pretty obvious that hyperinsulinemia affects the production of vitamin D, and hyperinsulinemia is associated with steroid hormone defects anywhere from immunodeficiency to inflammation to Alzheimer's to malabsorption from the intestinal tract to everything. But to blame vitamin D for that and to correct one little element like vitamin D and expect to get better from everything without understanding root cause is lunacy, and you're kidding yourself. So yes, there is an association, but the prescribers of vitamin D call it causal. It's not causal. It's an association. There is an association between firemen and fires. There's an association between low vitamin D levels and illness. But the question is, did the low vitamin D levels cause the illness, or is the illness the cause of the low vitamin D? And secondarily, and more importantly, is supplementing vitamin D, or any of the other supplements that you take, is supplementation fixing the problem? And the answer is no. The evidence, at least so far, by the people that have studied this, is, including a large meta-analysis that was done by a guy called Boland in 2014, is that there's no evidence to support the fact that taking vitamin D supplementation does shit other than profit for the company selling it. So the reason to take vitamin D and to promote it everywhere is if you own stock in the company that sells it. And yet we religiously take our vitamin D because our numbers are low. A low vitamin D number is an observation. It is not a disease. And too many doctors treat the observation with the drug without ever walking it back and saying, why is their D low? And let's see what the cause is and let's treat the cause. How many people do I not see on thyroid hormone? And when I ask them what their disease is, they said, I'm hypothyroid. How do you know you're hypothyroid? Because my numbers were low. What's your disease? I don't know. How many people don't take statins? Oh, your LDL's high. You must take your statin. The drug companies cannot tell you. They cannot tell you, they cannot tell you, they cannot tell you that taking a statin reduces cardiovascular risk. Because there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that taking statins reduces cardiovascular risk. We know that statins drop LDL. So they allow you and your doctor to make that assumption and give you a drug that doesn't work. You know something funny? In all this COVID literature, really cool paper that just looked at an observation. They looked at an observation. And the observation was, it was just published last week, the observation was that the lower your LDL, the higher your risk of severe cardiovascular outcome with COVID. Exactly the opposite of the intent of statins. And that was a statistically significant observation in a large number of people. Makes you think, doesn't it? And LDL, we know, is part of the immune system, immune function. So, all because they say it on the label, all because some sexy expert on TV tells you it must be so, maybe it's an association, not a cause, and maybe there is no benefit to the drug. So as you vigorously defend supplements, I don't care if you take them or not, but ask the question. And understand why you are taking it, who's promoting it, and is there any benefit? I take no supplements. I eat real food. I may die tomorrow. I may not.